She sat quietly by the window, her gaze lost in the sea of clouds outside. The soft hum of the engines filled the cabin, a steady rhythm that almost lulled the other passengers into a dreamlike calm. A child laughed 2 rows back. An old man flipped through a magazine. A couple whispered about their vacation plans. The world inside the plane felt perfectly ordinary, a fragile bubble of peace suspended, 30,000 feet above the earth. But she didn't belong to that peace. Her name wasn't on any manifest under her true identity. To the world, she was Anna Reed, a quiet consultant traveling home. To those who really knew her, and very few did, she was Raven 3, a shadow the military called upon only when things had already gone wrong. The faint reflection of her face in the cabin window looked calm, almost serene. But her mind was anything but still. Every vibration of the engines, every cough, every flicker of movement in her peripheral vision registered like data in a system. She'd trained herself to notice everything, because missing the smallest detail once had cost her a team, a mission, and a piece of her humanity she could never get back. The seatbelt sign blinked off. A flight attendant began moving down the aisle, offering drinks. Anna smiled politely when asked, declined the beverage, and kept her hands folded over her lap. Her nails were short, clean, her posture precise, years of discipline compressed into quiet composure. From the outside, she looked like someone deep in thought, perhaps reminiscing, perhaps tired from travel. But inside, a storm waited. She was on this flight for a reason, and though the official briefing had called it a routine escort mission, Anna had learned long ago that routine was just another word for unexpected. She shifted her gaze toward the clouds again. Somewhere beneath them, far below, entire cities lived and breathed, unaware of the silent wars fought above their heads. The hum of the jet engines began to feel too steady, too predictable, a rhythm that lulled others, but put her instincts on alert. She knew that peace was fragile. It never lasted. Her right hand brushed lightly against the inside of her jacket, feeling the cool metal outline of the device concealed there. Not a weapon, but a communicator. Coded, secure, untraceable. Only 2 frequencies ever reached it. One of them belonged to the United States Air Command. The other belonged to someone she hadn't spoken to in years. She pushed the thought away before it could take shape. Memories were distractions. Distractions got people killed. "Excuse me, miss," said a voice beside her. A middle-aged man smiling awkwardly. "First time flying?" She turned her head slightly, studying him with polite detachment. "No," she said softly, her voice low, calm. "Not the first." He chuckled nervously, sensing something in her tone he couldn't name. "Right, of course. Just, you look so calm." "Most people are nervous," she smiled faintly. "Calm is relative." The man nodded, unsure how to respond, and turned back to his book. The conversation dissolved, and Anna's eyes returned to the window. Then it happened, a flicker on the horizon. Barely visible through the clouds, a streak of light that shouldn't have been there. Her heartbeat didn't quicken, it slowed. Every sense sharpened. She unbuckled her seatbelt, pretending to adjust her position. The faintest click sounded from beneath her seat. A compartment most passengers didn't even know existed. Inside, a small black case rested, marked only with 3 silver letters, R3. Her earpiece vibrated once, silent, subtle, coded. A message pulsed through. Unidentified aircraft detected. F-16s engaged, multiple hostiles. Civilian transport in proximity. That's you. Anna exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing. "Copy that," she whispered under her breath, though no one could hear her. Her reflection in the glass changed, no longer that of a calm traveler, but of a soldier remembering who she was. A second later, the intercom crackled. The pilot's voice broke through, shaky but composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to be experiencing a bit of turbulence. Please remain seated." But Anna knew turbulence didn't move in straight lines. The cabin shuddered, not violently, but enough to make the attendants grab the backs of seats. Gasps rippled through the passengers. Somewhere behind her, a baby started crying. Anna leaned forward slightly, scanning the clouds. A dark silhouette darted across the sky. Too close, too fast. Fighter jets. Her instincts screamed confirmation. Her pulse stayed steady as she reached under her jacket, flipped open the communicator, and pressed a single button. The device flickered to life, the small green light reflected in her eyes. "This is Raven 3 aboard civilian flight 204. Confirm visual on F-16s. Situation escalating. Preparing authorization code, static." Then, a voice she recognized instantly, sharp and urgent. "Raven 3, do not engage. We've scrambled A-10 Thunder support. Hold position." A rare hint of emotion tugged at her lips. Relief, or maybe pride. "Acknowledged," she said quietly. She leaned back in her seat, the cabin still trembling, chaos murmuring all around her. But she sat there, perfectly still, as the clouds outside began to glow with streaks of fire and thunder. The others saw only flashes of light in the distance, like a storm. But Anna knew better. That was the sound of war, and the roar of the A-10 meant salvation. And so she watched, quietly as the sky burned, to everyone else. She was still just the quiet passenger. Only she knew that the peace they clung to was being defended by monsters of metal and ghosts like her. The kind that never came home and never truly landed. Suddenly a sharp alarm pierced through the pilot's headsets. The shrill tone cut through the calm like a blade, jolting both men in the cockpit to attention. "Mayday! Mayday, this is Falcon 2, we're under fire! Repeat, we are under fire!" The desperate voice of an F-16 pilot crackled through the static, urgent and ragged. Outside, unseen beyond the thick veil of clouds, something deadly moved. Fast, precise, deliberate. Inside the passenger cabin, the first tremor rippled through the aircraft. It wasn't violent, not yet, just a sudden dip, a vibration that made plastic cups quiver on tray tables. Passengers exchanged confused looks. Then came the second jolt, harder this time, and a collective gasp filled the air. The flight attendants froze mid-aisle, their practiced smiles faltering as the captain's voice came through the intercom, shaky but controlled. "Ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelts. We're experiencing some turbulence." But this wasn't turbulence. The woman in seat 14A knew the difference. Turbulence didn't make the sky growl. It didn't carry the faint echo of missile locks and supersonic movement. She could feel it, the rhythm of chaos approaching. Her hand rested calmly on the armrest, while her eyes flicked to the window. Through the clouds, something glinted, a flash of metal slicing through white mist. Then another, jets, F-16s. And they were running. The other passengers were still blissfully unaware. Some tightened their seatbelts, others whispered in fear, wondering if the weather had turned rough. A baby started crying 2 rows ahead, the cabin filled with nervous chatter. But she, the woman in 14A, didn't move. Not yet. Her heart didn't race. Years of conditioning had burned that instinct out of her. She counted seconds between tremors, listening to the engines. She could tell by the sound that the pilot had reduced thrust, trying to stabilize altitude. Smart, but futile. If they were caught in the middle of an aerial engagement, altitude wouldn't save them. The intercom crackled again, but this time it wasn't the captain. It was another voice entirely, rough, distorted by static. "Falcon 1 to command. We've got bogies on radar. 3 unidentified, approaching fast. We're hit! The transmission cut off with a burst of white noise. Then silence. Gasps turned to murmurs. Someone shouted, "What was that?" A flight attendant tried to calm them, voice trembling. "Everything is fine. Please remain seated." The woman in 14A finally unbuckled her seatbelt. The small metallic click sounded almost too loud in the tense quiet. She rose slowly, movements deliberate, her face calm. Her eyes had hardened, no longer distant or thoughtful, but focused, sharp as steel. The man seated beside her, the same one who had chatted earlier, looked up in alarm. "Ma'am, you shouldn't—" She turned her head just enough to meet his eyes. "It's okay," she said quietly, voice flat, absolute. "Stay seated." Something in her tone made him obey without question. She reached into the inner pocket of her jacket and withdrew a small black card case. No one noticed. All eyes were on the trembling ceiling panels and flickering lights. The plane shuddered again, the lights dimming for a split second before stabilizing. A scream rang out from the back. She moved toward the aisle, her steps measured, balanced, like someone used to walking on unstable ground. As she approached the front, a flight attendant tried to block her path. "Ma'am, please return to your seat." She showed the attendant the card, flipping it open with a practiced flick of her wrist. Inside was a sleek ID with a golden crest. U.S. Air Command, Clearance Alpha Black. The attendant's words died on her lips. She froze, eyes widening as she glanced at the holographic seal shimmering under the cabin light. The woman spoke softly, but her tone carried authority that left no room for argument. "Open the cockpit. Now." The attendant hesitated, fear and confusion warring on her face. I can't. It's against emergency override," the woman said, already moving past her. "You'll find the protocol in your training manual. Section 9, line 3. The attendant blinked, stunned. She had read that line during her security certification, but no one had ever told her it was real. Her hands shook as she entered a code on the control panel beside the reinforced cockpit door. The lock disengaged with a faint hiss. The door opened. Inside, the cockpit was chaos. Warning lights flashing red, radar screens blinking with incoming contacts. The pilots' faces were pale, sweat glistening on their foreheads. One of them spun around, startled. "Who the hell are you?" "Raven 3, she said simply. "Move." He hesitated for a moment, then stepped aside, recognition dawning too late to question it. She slid into the co-pilot's seat, fingers already flying across the comms console. Her calm was absolute, clinical. "This is Raven 3, she said into the mic. "Confirm visual on F-16 distress signal. Civilian aircraft 204 is in conflict zone. Requesting immediate A-10 support. Code authorization Bravo." There was a pause, then a voice crackled back through the static. "Deep and firm. Copy that, Raven 3. A-10 Thunder inbound. ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes is too long," she murmured. The pilot looked at her, wide-eyed. "Are we in danger?" She gave him a sidelong glance, then out the cockpit window, the clouds flashing with distant bursts of light. "We already are." For a moment, silence fell again. The woman adjusted the headset, her voice steady, her heartbeat unreadable. Outside, the sky rumbled, and somewhere in the distance, something massive roared to life, a sound that promised both destruction and salvation. She walked calmly to the front, the faint vibration of the engines humming beneath her boots. Around her, the cabin rippled with half-suppressed panic, whispers, gasps, the staccato click of seatbelts locking. Yet she moved through it as though walking down a quiet hallway. Every motion was precise, deliberate. At the front, a flight attendant stepped into her path, voice trembling. "Ma'am, please, you can't." The woman didn't argue. She flipped open a small black card wallet. The golden crest caught the light. U.S. Air Command, Clearance Alpha. The attendant froze. Her breath hitched. Her training manuals had mentioned such badges in theory, but she'd never believed they existed outside of movies. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Step aside," the woman said softly. No anger, no urgency, just authority, quiet and absolute. The kind that made people obey before they understood why. Seconds later, the reinforced cockpit door hissed open. The narrow space beyond glowed red from warning lights. Alarms beeped in chaotic rhythm. 2 pilots sat rigid, hands tight on the controls. One turned sharply at the sound of the door. "Who the hell?" he began. "Raven 3, she said, sliding past him with practiced ease. "Move." Something in her tone, clipped military, made him obey before his mind caught up. She dropped into the co-pilot's seat and scanned the instrument panels. Her fingers began to fly across switches and comm dials, the way a pianist finds familiar keys. "What are you doing?" the captain demanded. "Saving your lives," she replied without looking up. Her voice was calm, detached, the sound of someone who had been here before, too many times. She adjusted the frequency knob, bypassing civilian channels until she reached a secure military band. Static hissed for a moment, then cleared. "This is Raven 3, she said into the mic. "Activating A-10 Thunder support. Repeat, authorized strike pattern Bravo. Civilian transport 204 is in engagement zone." The captain blinked at her, disbelief and terror fighting for dominance. You're serious? You can't just... We're a passenger flight. Her eyes lifted to his, cool and steady. Not for the next 5 minutes. He swallowed hard and looked back to the windshield. Outside, the clouds were flashing with distant light. Brief, silent flares like lightning, only sharper. Metallic. The radio crackled. Copy that. Raven 3, A-10 Thunderbolt inbound. ETA 4 minutes. Confirm hostiles? She answered immediately. Visual confirmed. 3 bogies engaging F-16 units. 1 down, 2 active. We're between them and the coast. The co-pilot stared at her. How the hell do you know that? She almost smiled. Because they're broadcasting on open band and your radar's blind past 20 miles. My implants aren't. For a second, neither man spoke. The word implants hung in the air like smoke. Outside, another flash. The plane rocked slightly. Oxygen masks trembled above the passengers' heads. The captain gripped the controls. They're fighting above us, he said. Not for long, she murmured. Then, in a softer tone, to the radio, Raven 3 requesting strike corridor clearance. Civilians aboard, altitude 30,000. Will hold course 270. Acknowledged, Raven 3. A-10's rerouting. Stand by for visual. Her eyes narrowed on the horizon. She could feel it before she saw it. The low, thunderous rumble that rolled through the airframe, deeper than the whine of jet engines. The sound of power. The A-10 Thunderbolt 2 was coming. The captain whispered, almost reverent. That's the Warthog. She nodded once. And she's angry. The cockpit filled with the muffled roars of distant cannons. The sky beyond the windshield erupted in flashes, long streaks of tracer fire cutting through the clouds. Somewhere out there, the F-16 pilots who had cried for help were breathing again. The co-pilot's voice shook. Are we in danger of being hit? Not if they're good, she said. And they're the best. The radio crackled again. Thunder lead to Raven 3. We have eyes on the hostiles. Engaging. She exhaled slowly. Make it clean. From her vantage point, through the narrow slit of the windshield, she caught a glimpse of it. The unmistakable shape of an A-10 diving through the mist, its nose cannon spitting fire. The sound followed a heartbeat later, a deep, rolling brrrt that rattled the fuselage like distant thunder. The captain flinched. Jesus Christ, stay steady, she said quietly. They're painting targets, not us. Another explosion flared far to the left. A trail of smoke spiraled downward, disappearing into the clouds. Hostile 1 down, came the radio. Her hand tightened slightly on the comm switch. Confirmed. Continue pattern Bravo. As the pilots watched, the transformation in her became undeniable. Gone was the quiet passenger from seat 14A. This was someone else entirely, precise, commanding, and utterly in control. The co-pilot finally asked the question that had been sitting on both men's tongues since she entered. Who are you, really? She kept her eyes on the sky, the one they call when no one else answers. Another silence, filled only by the hiss of comms and the rhythmic pulse of warning lights. Outside, the A-10 roared past again, so close its shadow swept over their wings. The second hostile vanished in a blaze of light. Thunder lead to Raven 3, targets neutralized. Area clear. For the first time, her posture eased. She pressed the transmit button once more. Good work. Returning to silent mode. Copy that, Raven 3. Safe skies. The radio went quiet. Inside the cockpit, the red warnings faded one by one until the panels glowed steady green. The pilots sat in stunned silence, the enormity of what had just happened settling over them. Finally, the captain managed, We owe you our lives. She didn't look at him. You owe them, she said, nodding toward the window where the A-10s disappeared into the sunlight. Then she stood, removed the headset, and handed it back. Maintain course. Keep the passengers calm. Nothing happened here. The captain hesitated. Understood. She turned to leave, pausing at the door. For just a heartbeat, something human flickered across her face. Fatigue, or maybe sorrow. Then it was gone. By the time she walked back down the aisle, the cabin had quieted again. The passengers were whispering, wondering what the turbulence had been. None of them noticed her slip into seat 14A, rebuckle her belt, and close her eyes. To them, she was still just a traveler. But to the silent skies outside, she was Raven 3, the reason the flight still had wings. She walked calmly to the front, showing a small black card to the flight attendant. U.S. Air Command, Clearance Alpha. The attendant froze, eyes wide. Moments later, she was inside the cockpit, her voice cool and steady over the radio. "This is Raven 3, activating A-10 Thunder support. Repeat, authorize A-10 strike pattern Bravo." Her tone changed, from quiet passenger to commanding officer. The pilot stared at her, stunned. She wasn't just a traveler. She was the reason they were still. Then came the sound, deep, thunderous, unstoppable. It wasn't the kind of sound that merely reached your ears. It hit you, shuddered through bone and steel alike. The A-10 Thunderbolt screamed out of the clouds, its twin engines splitting the sky. For a heartbeat, the clouds tore open like curtains before a storm, revealing a beast of metal and fury. Its cannons blazed, not once, but in relentless bursts. The air itself trembled with each round fired. The enemy jets, sleek and fast, tried to dart away, their trails slicing through the gray sky like wounded ghosts. But they were outmatched. The A-10 wasn't built for grace. It was built to end things. Inside the civilian aircraft, the passengers could see only flashes, streaks of light across the horizon, glows hidden behind cloud cover. To them, it might have been lightning. A few people whispered prayers. Some clutched hands. One child peered curiously through a crack in the window shade, whispering to his mother, "Mommy, is that a storm?" No one had answers. But in the cockpit, the truth played out in brutal clarity. Through the narrow glass, the woman, Raven 3, watched the distant explosions flicker like dying stars. Her expression didn't change. Her breathing stayed even, her voice calm when she finally spoke into the comm headset. "Thunderlead, this is Raven 3. Targets confirmed neutralized. Maintain visual sweep." Static crackled. Then came the reply, steady, respectful. "Copy, Raven 3. All hostiles down. We're escorting you to clear skies." Her eyes followed the last spiral of smoke vanishing into the clouds. One enemy jet gone in a bright flash, the second, trailing black and orange fire, descending into oblivion. Then, silence. The sky was clean again. She leaned back in the co-pilot's seat, the tension in her shoulders finally easing. Her voice softened to a whisper, meant for no one but herself. "Mission complete. Continue the flight." The captain, still gripping the controls, exhaled shakily. "That's it?" he asked, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "It's over?" "It's never really over," she murmured, removing the headset. He turned toward her, eyes wide, still processing what had happened, the storm, the chaos. The stranger who had taken command of his cockpit like she owned the sky. "Who are you?" he asked, almost pleading. She didn't answer. Instead, she stood, adjusting the cuffs of her jacket. Neat, precise, emotionless. Every movement returned to control, every gesture rehearsed. "I was never here," she said quietly. He stared at her for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "Understood." She opened the cockpit door. The red emergency lights had dimmed, replaced by the soft amber of normal flight. The hum of the engines returned, steady, soothing, familiar. Outside the door, the world had already forgotten that death had just brushed its fingertips across the wings. When she stepped into the aisle, every head turned slightly, curious. Passengers glanced up at her, sensing something in her posture, the weight of invisible authority. No one spoke. They didn't know what to ask, or maybe they were too afraid to. She walked back to her seat, calm as ever, her boots making almost no sound against the floor. Row after row of faces blurred past her, strangers caught between fear and relief. They would remember the turbulence, maybe even the flashes of light outside the window. But not her. She reached seat 14A, sat down, and buckled her belt. A child a few rows ahead looked over the seat back at her, wide-eyed. "Are we safe now?" he asked softly. She met his gaze for just a moment, then smiled. A small human smile. "Yes," she said. "You're safe." The boy grinned and turned around, reassured. Her smile faded the moment he looked away. Outside, the clouds parted, revealing the sun breaking through. The sky, moments ago a war zone, was now painted in gold. The A-10s flanked them for a brief minute, silent guardians, their silhouettes gliding in formation. Then, one by one, they veered off, fading into the horizon. The world below went on, oblivious. In the soft reflection of the window, she could see her own face again. Calm, almost peaceful. But she knew better. She had seen too much sky burn to mistake silence for serenity. Her hand brushed against the edge of her communicator, now dormant. No light blinked, no voice answered. She exhaled slowly. In her head, the old words echoed, the ones that had started all of this. You'll protect them, even if they never know you did. And she always had. That was her curse and her oath. Behind her, a flight attendant quietly approached. "Ma'am," she whispered, still pale from the ordeal. "The captain," he said to thank you. Raven 3 shook her head. "Don't. Thank the ones who flew into the fire." The attendant hesitated, as if wanting to say more, then simply nodded and left her in peace. The woman leaned her head back against the seat, the gentle vibration of the plane returning her to the illusion of normalcy. Someone laughed softly a few rows away, a nervous, grateful sound. The cabin was alive again. She closed her eyes. For the rest of the passengers, the turbulence would become a story, that one crazy flight where something weird happened. They'd never know how close they had come. They'd never know the name Raven 3, or that somewhere in the data archives of Air Command, a classified mission log had just been marked, "Resolved, no casualties." Outside, the sun dipped behind a new wall of clouds, painting everything in amber light. The engines purred. The flight continued, steady and uneventful, exactly as it was meant to. And in seat 14A, the woman who had called death from the skies simply rested. Her eyes closed, her heartbeat steady, her mind already somewhere far beyond this flight. For now, she was no one, just another quiet passenger, adrift among the clouds. But the sky would remember her. It always did.